The president's set to unveil his long-awaited infrastructure plan. We've heard it's $1.5 trillion, but that includes private money. It's expected to call for federal spending of $200 billion over 10 years, intended to spark state, local, and private investment, resulting in a $1.5 trillion new spending bill. Lee, the White House says President Trump will be traveling to promote the initiative after it's unveiled. Perception from the people you're speaking with?
Look, I think it's really important that the president out there is sharing his message, because when he doesn't share it, everybody else shares an opposite message for him. And we've seen when he goes out there and talks to the American people about the plans, about what it's going to do for them, it only helps his numbers and helps people feel more confident. Infrastructure is something that he's been promised that he was going to do. It's something that I think a lot of the American people want, and I think it's something a lot of the Democrats can agree is an important thing to do. Now, that said, a lot of criticism coming on how we're spending, on the budget, and is this all the right thing to do? So he's really got a story to tell to make people feel comfortable and confident, and he's going to have to stick through some tough times. Yeah,
I mean, last week we were talking about the 18 budget, Dagan, and there wasn't a lot of happy faces with the Republicans as part of that budget. This infrastructure plan is going to be part of the president's 2019 budget set to be released today.
His budget for the next year is largely moot because you have Congress that's already agreed to a 2-year budget plan, which includes $300 billion in additional spending. $20 billion of that, by the way, is in infrastructure. So he's got a $200 billion infrastructure plan. Who's paying for that? Where's that money going to come from? Because right now in the markets, the concern is, will policymakers, the central bank, overreact to rising inflation, particularly in wages? You have the 10-year yield moving up. I think it was at 2.88% this morning. That's a sign that the economy is still okay. Nevertheless, we have a president who's cutting taxes, who's raising spending, and we've got $1 trillion annual budget deficits on the horizon. That is not a good situation, not for the U.S. fisc, right, and not for the markets.
And markets reacted to this at the end of last week. You know it. I mean, that was one of the issues. And the White House says that this 19 budget includes increased spending for immigration, for border security, for veterans, medical care, money to help fight the opioid epidemic. Beyond spending, the budget proposes cutting deficits by $3 trillion over the next decade through an aggressive set of spending programs. Aggressive set of spending programs.
Is it for entitlement reform?
Exactly. The budget also assumes the U.S. economy will grow 3% annually over the coming decade. So, Dagan, I mean, they're making a big assumption here that growth is actually going to cut into all of this spending and put a limit to the spending. But we know that we're looking at trillion-dollar deficits over the coming years.
In large part because of this budget that the Republicans pushed through, this agreement on $300 billion in additional spending. What will help, and I'll add this, the tax reform will help, because we do need a faster-growing economy. We do need more revenue coming into the U.S. government. We didn't have that in the most recent year. Revenue was up 1%. That will help, but then you do need to cut spending, and you're not seeing that. Again, in this budget that the Republicans passed, you had $6 billion in additional spending for the opioid crisis, on top of $1 billion that they handed out. Again, where's this money coming from? Ultimately, people say, oh, we need to raise spending on the military. We did that, but you know what hurts our national defense more than anything is ended up paying money out in interest on our debt to China. We're literally a few years from now be funneling money just on the interest on our existing debt to China, to our enemies.
As rates go up, that's the reality, Mike Murphy, and that's what markets have been reacting to. I know what you're going to say. The backdrop is strong, because it is.
The backdrop is strong, and I think the backdrop of this infrastructure bill is a little bit different than what we've seen before, because where's the money coming from? It's 80% from the on the
private sector.
Private and local governments versus the federal government.
Okay.
They've reversed it from where it used to be 80% from the federal, 20% local. Well, now it's going to be 80% local. So in other words, if you want to fix a road or a bridge in your municipality or your area, you have to put up a bulk of the funding, and then the federal government will help you. It looks to me like, from a business standpoint, it's saying not a handout for you or a handout for you. If you can do part of the heavy lifting, then we're there to help you. So
well, that's why
I
it's
like that part of it.
$200 billion federal.
Yes.
The rest is private or, as you say, state and local.
Yes.
Right, but if, to all those people who mocked the shovel-ready jobs that were in this stimulus package back in 2009, then you ought to be mocking this. I know that we need infrastructure spending in this country. Well, then make the people who use our roads and bridges pay for it. Our gas
You're
tax,
talking about a gas
our
tax.
national gas tax has not gone up in about a quarter of a century, and that's just absurd. I'll leave it at that.
Well, we've got the CEO of the American Trucking Association coming up, and he's going to have ideas in terms of paying for this as well. We'll see what he has to say about a gas tax increase, because you've been talking about that for a long time.
Yeah, and the Trump administration is not going to propose that. They're going to propose that this $200 billion in infrastructure spending comes from spending cuts. So where that's going to happen, who knows? Because, again, everybody wants a piece of the pie. Everybody wants a piece of this spending. By the way, we're borrowing this money to hand it out. It's interesting to see what ends up being put to work.
And we know that they're not going to cut back on entitlements right now.
Oh, no. They're
Even
not.
though that's where the growth, that's where the growth of the money is.
I'm just waiting for 11 years when the hospital fund in Medicare goes belly up, and it's an immediate cut to benefits, 88 cents on the dollar. That's what's on the horizon for this country.